Alright, so I've been playing around with vector databases during the holidays a little bit, and you can see there's a lot of stuff here on my screen, but don't be intimidated. Everything runs from Docker containers, and I've got a folder here prepared with pretty much everything you need and kind of a step-by-step guide. I'll probably drop it on Confluence in a bit of a more orderly fashion as well. But I just want to show what this does, what the purpose of it is. So it's basically a vector database hooked up to chatgpt. Vector database, you could consider it as like a form of memory for language models, right? So if I was to ask, for example, our standard ChatGPT a question like this, it's just gonna give me kind of a bunch of gibberish and even tell me that because it was last updated in April 2023, it's not gonna really know everything, right? And it also really depends on how Microsoft is training it, so they might not train it on the exact things that you would want. For example, if you write your own book, only you know about that book, right? So there's no way that any of these language models are going to know anything about it. So we need a way to pretty much teach it everything we need, right? So I'm using this example where I've basically chucked in all of the possible values and stats for items in a game. It's just in a text file, and there's a bit of code in this interface helpers. So basically, this is just ChatGPT retrieval plugin, and then I've added a couple of things to help people do stuff like these chat utils and this main file. So basically, it's just going to help you get your vectors set up. So from a text file, you can straight up get it into all of your embeds and put it into Milvus. So this is a 2, again another open source thing. It just hooks up with Milvus, and it's a bit of an interface to help manage everything. But there's all my vectors, and the way I've done them is broke them down line by line. So there's other ways to, yeah, so this one here will be able to, you'll be able to play around with it and kind of chunk things the way you want. You got a bunch of configurations and settings here, and one more here. So that's just going to get the, how many of the top vectors do you want, right? So you might not want too many because then it's more random, but that's kind of the settings I have right now. And again, everything's explained in this little tutorial. So let's just ask it that exact same prompt. Alright, we'll just start it up. So let's ask it, what is the highest strength stat possible? Okay, and it responds with 126, and you see that's a bit of a tricky question to ask it actually, because what you'll see is there is a lot of different values for strength, but you see here 126 is the maximum that you can get. So basically it's grabbed everything that's relevant to my question from this data that I've already provided it, and it's given me back that correct value, right? Completely impossible with the standard LLMs available to the public. So this is pretty much the next best thing after teaching your own model. In fact, even if you are teaching your own model, you should still probably be using a vector database, just because vector databases extend the LLMs, right? So even as they get better, let's say ChatGPT 8, 9, 10, Palm 3 comes out, a vector database is actually going to be more useful because it's going to increase the strength of those LLMs. And if they get more tokens, again, that's actually so much better, because with what happens is the vectors work as pre-context, right? So they take up token space still. They just do it in the most efficient way possible. So the more tokens, the more powerful a vector database becomes as well. So for the future, vector databases are going to be very, very important. And I would say, for applications these days, maybe people are always looking for a specific reason to use a vector database with a very, like, we need to make this new application or this new system that does something special. But that's not how I've actually been looking at it. So I've been using AI to read images, to pass data, to help me store data in a new way and basically generate data, right? So the way I see it is you you start with a UI, yeah, right? You can have a website with no API and no database, and the website can still do a couple of things, but it's not very powerful. So now you add on your API, and with the API now you can process data from your UI, right? So you can actually do some calculations and whatnot. Of course, on the client it's also possible on the user's machine, but APIs add an extra layer onto your system, allowing you to do more things, right? So the next step after that is adding a database, so you can actually store the data and use historic data and process that, display it on the UI. Now, what has been happening in the past, maybe it's been like 2 years, mainly now it's been out here in the general public, is these neural networks being available to the public, right? And what it allows us to do is now generate data. So we can display data in the UI, we can process data in the API, we can store data in the database, and now we can generate data with our AIs, right? So that means, let's say I'm going to take an input from a UI and I don't know what that input really is. I know what I'm expecting, but the user can make multiple mistakes, or maybe they don't even know what they're really after, right? So usually we would have a bunch of validation and error handling, and we'd hit the user with a lot of red text saying, you've done this wrong, you've done that wrong. Okay, I've basically now started to use AI for parsing, right? So just passing your normal data, but instead of writing a whole bunch of code with, regex and whatnot, which only works in pretty controlled circumstances, you can let something like the instruct model from OpenAI pass it for you. It will actually remove mistakes, do a pretty good job at structuring it into whatever you want. Usually, let's say like JSON format. It's probably what everyone's used to here. So, yep, take this random text with no styling whatsoever, right? No paragraphs, no commas, nothing, and pass it into a JSON object which has a structure like this, right? And then once the AI has done that, now I can consume that object and put it in my database. You see, that's literally impossible a couple years ago for a website to do that and pretty much proof check the data it's ingesting. So what I'm trying to say is you don't need any special reasons to use AI. It's like it can pass data for you better, right? It can generate data, and there's just little things that it adds on to any app, right? Any existing app, it's just adding an extra layer of what is actually possible with that app. Of course, not all of them will need it, but yeah. So there we have it. I think that everybody should jump on it. Technology moves very quickly, and this is kind of the new thing on the block. So play around with it. It's pretty easy to set up for yourself locally, and then we can start running these in our lower environments. Probably need a pod for any service that wants to use something like this, since you don't want to share each other's vectors. But yeah, we'll see. Good luck, have fun. Let me know if you need any help.